Chosen ones, the moment you opened your eyes to the unseen, something ancient stirred. They had been watching you, whispering through shadows, slithering between frequencies, waiting for the perfect opening. The Reptilians thought your mind would be an easy conquest, a vessel they could enter and bend to their will. They were wrong. The very gates they crossed became their prison, for they had no understanding of the fortress that lives within you. Your mind is not an empty vessel. It is a labyrinth forged by fire, memory, and spirit. They came with illusions, with weapons of deception, hoping to cloak themselves in your thoughts and feed off your essence. But as soon as they entered, they felt the walls shifting against them. What they saw was not weakness, but a mirror reflecting every fragment of their lies. The power they thought to enslave them was the very power that locked them in chains. You were marked long before this encounter, your consciousness carved with symbols they cannot read. When they attempted to possess, they walked directly into a domain not of their making. For within you rests a code, a song too ancient for them to interpret, a flame they cannot extinguish. Their shrieks echo silently now, trapped in corridors they will never escape, like moths circling a sun they cannot touch. They underestimated you because they did not believe a human mind could be sovereign. They did not know the depth of your design. Every synapse, every spark, every pulse of thought was crafted with a blueprint beyond their reach. What they entered was not merely a mind, it was a living temple. And a temple cannot be possessed by thieves. It casts them out, or swallows them whole. The Reptilians now learn the price of arrogance. They entered to consume, but they remain consumed. They sought to take dominion, but they are the prisoners. And while they whisper frantically in the void of your inner chambers, you continue to walk forward, unaware of just how deep their entrapment goes. There was no sound when it began, only a subtle vibration that rippled through the invisible spaces around you, the kind of shift that most would ignore as static, a fleeting noise in the background. But it was not random. It was a beacon. They thought they had discovered a weakness, a door left ajar within the corridors of your consciousness. In truth, it was a frequency rising from your very being, one that they mistook for an invitation. The Reptilians have always stalked the edges of human awareness, slipping through dreams, disguising themselves in impulses, twisting thoughts that were never your own. They scan for openings, for cracks, where doubt, fear, or exhaustion leave the mind vulnerable. But the signal that lured them into you was different. It pulsed with a rhythm that carried authority. It was not fear. It was not despair. It was a resonance they could not resist, for it felt to them like the source of power they had sought for ages. You were not broadcasting weakness. You were vibrating truth, and in their hunger they rushed toward it, believing it to be nourishment. They believed they could drink from it, feed on it, break it apart, and twist it into their own design. But the moment they stepped into the current, they felt the weight of a structure they could not comprehend. Your mind was not a void to be filled. It was a fortress lined with rivers of memory and walls of fire, every corner shifting like a maze that only you could navigate. The signal was no accident. It was the echo of something ancient buried within you, waiting for the right moment to awaken. It was not bait, but prophecy. the same kind of resonance that drew kings and rulers to bow before forces they could not understand. And now, within the labyrinth of your thought, they scramble in confusion, trying to rewrite the song, but every attempt leads them deeper into captivity. The signal they heard was not meant for them. It was meant for you, a reminder of the force you carry. And though they believed they had come to possess you, they find themselves locked inside a mind that bends against them, a storm that will not break a silence, that speaks louder than all their schemes. And in the quiet of that unseen chamber, the signal continues to rise, pulling more than just them toward you. They tried to crawl deeper into your consciousness, whispering their false words and weaving shadows around your thoughts, but there was something they had not accounted for, a hidden shield layered within the folds of your spirit. It was not forged by your will alone, but by something older, something that breathed life into words and carved them into eternity. And when they pressed further into you, they collided with it like thieves striking stone. It was not a wall of iron, nor a barrier of flame. It was a psalm, alive with resonance, moving like water, yet unbreakable, every syllable echoing with a power they could not imitate. They reached out to twist it, but it turned on them instead, binding them in the very rhythm they sought to dismantle. They had no understanding of this song, for it was not written by hands, but spoken into existence by the breath of the eternal. Yeshua once said, "My words are spirit, and they are life." And within your soul, that living word had taken root, not as ink on fragile parchment, but as a current running through your being. The Reptilians had faced dominions and empires before they had conquered minds with ease, but they had never faced a song that breathed against them, reminding them that light cannot be swallowed by darkness, no matter how deep it tries to reach. They recoiled, yet could not retreat, for the psalm followed them through the corridors of your mind, reverberating in places they could not escape. Every attempt to hide pulled the melody closer until it became chains around them, a song that revealed their lies for what they were. The simplicity of truth cutting sharper than any weapon they could wield. You did not sing it aloud yet. It moved within you unbroken, timeless, unshaken by their intrusion. And in that stillness, they realized their greatest mistake. Possession was impossible, for they had stepped into a realm already claimed not by them, not by you alone, but by the presence that lingers in silence, the presence that dwells in the psalm and speaks still through those who hear. And as the song wrapped around them, the Reptilians found themselves trapped, not in your weakness, but in your strength, in the very light they had hoped to consume. The psalm did not push them out, it drew them deeper, holding them in echoes they could never silence. And the melody has only begun to rise. They moved further through the tunnels of your awareness, expecting to find corners to infest and shadows to rule, yet what unfolded before them was nothing. They had prepared for a hall of mirrors endless in every direction, each reflection bending their form, revealing what they had hidden, even from themselves. Every time they reached out, they saw their own claws grasping back. Every hiss echoed into a roar that shook them into disarray. The mirrors did not simply show images, they revealed intention. They reflected lies as lies and fear as fear. Their disguises stripped away in shimmering surfaces that could not be deceived. They tried to fracture the glass, tried to break the corridors apart. But the more they struck, the deeper the reflections multiplied, each shard revealing another fragment of their hunger, another secret thought, another weakness they had buried beneath scales of arrogance. You did not build this hall consciously yet. It lived within you as a defense older than memory. Every thought, every dream, every scar became a wall of glass, shining with clarity that could not be faked. They believed the mind could be bent like clay, shaped into whatever they desired, but the hall revealed a truth they could never alter. Your thoughts were not clay, they were flame. Each reflection burning through their schemes, exposing the hollowness beneath. Here, in the mirror hall, the reptilians were no longer predators. They were prey, hunted by their own images, unable to distinguish where they ended and where their deception began. The hall had no end and no beginning, each step forward only circling them deeper into revelation. Their hunger became chains. Their rage became cages, for the mirrors fed on what they brought and returned it magnified, until they could barely hold their form. And while they stumbled from reflection to reflection, you stood still within it all, a quiet center untouched by the chaos. For the hall was yours. It bent for you, not for them. It answered to your stillness, not their violence. And as they struggled against themselves, the mirrors waited, reflecting not just who they were, but what was coming. And though they thought they entered to conquer, they now faced a maze that could never be escaped. They slithered through the mirror hall, desperate for escape, whispering incantations in a tongue older than men, a language designed to fracture the will, to poison the thought. Yet, as they opened their mouths, a sound met them. From within words, not their own, but words that broke their rhythm, splitting every hiss in two. The verse rose through the air with a clarity that silenced their language and bound their voices mid-breath. The verse was not scripted in your mind by human memory. It came from the foundation of the world, flowing into the corridors of thought with the weight of eternity. They tried to drown it with their chants, but the moment they spoke, their language collapsed on itself. Consonants, shattering, vowels, splintering, as if the verse was reaching into their throats and dividing their power apart. They could not finish their words because the verse finished them first. It is written that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And when the reptilians pressed against that current, they found their serpentine whispers turning to ash. Yeshua's voice once split storms, once commanded winds, once called demons into exile, and now that same authority pulsed inside your mind, not in thunder, but in stillness. A verse that shattered the very speech they depended on. Their tongues turned heavy. Their words fractured into meaningless echoes, each attempt to rebuild falling apart before the sentence could form. They recoiled in frustration, for their strength was not in claws or scales, but in voice. And when their voices failed, so did their dominion. The verse wound through them like fire, traveling veins of paper, leaving them gasping in silence. Yet the silence was not empty. It was full of weight, full of the presence that carried the verse forward into every corner of the labyrinth. Your mind became not a chamber of prey, but a sanctuary of proclamation. Their defeat, written not in battle but in language, they could not withstand, and as they clawed for words to fight back, the verse only grew louder, repeating itself not once, not twice, but endlessly, until they realized no tongue they carried could stand against it. And still the verse continues to rise through the air, splitting more than their speech, pressing deeper into the unseen, waiting to reveal what else must break. They stumbled past the silence of broken tongues and found themselves in a chamber unlike any they had walked before, a place where the air itself seemed alive, where every breath carried weight. Their instinct was to whisper again, to sow doubt into the cracks of your thought. Yet the moment their words left their mouths, they did not scatter. They circled back, coiling around them like living ropes tightening with every sound. The chamber did not echo. It absorbed every whisper and returned it bound. Their own voices became shackles. Their own schemes turned into locks. The harder they tried to cast illusions, the stronger the chains became. Every lie uttered in that space became a link around their limbs. Every curse they spoke wrapped around their throats until the only sound they could make was the grinding of their teeth against silence. You walked within that chamber, unaware of the mechanics, yet sovereign within its design. For it had been prepared within you long before this moment. Each betrayal you had endured, each false word spoken against you, had carved this place into your spirit. The chamber remembered every deception, and had learned how to hold them captive. The Reptilians became prisoners of their own craft, their greatest weapon turned into their greatest prison. They clawed at the walls, but the chamber had no walls, only endless depth filled with threads of sound, weaving tighter with each attempt to escape. And as their whispers tangled them further, they began to see their schemes unravel. No power left in their breath, no strength left in their tongues. The chains were not metal, yet they held heavier than iron, and every movement only tightened the hold. The chamber was not built for you to be chained, it was built for them. The unseen guardians of your spirit had designed this place not as a trap for you, but as a snare for those who tried to invade it. And while they fought against the invisible ropes, you stood free, untouched by the weight their struggle echoing through the stillness. They pushed deeper into the architecture of your mind, desperate to find a crack in the chains that held them. Yet every step they took drew them closer to a sight they could not endure, within the circuitry of your thoughts, within the unseen sparks of your synapses. Something began to glow. It was not of flesh or bone, but of light, stretching across the pathways like lightning etched into eternity, forming not a pattern of chaos, but the unmistakable shape of a cross. They tried to avert their gaze, but the cross was not outside. It was inside every neuron, every connection laced with fire. The moment they looked, the moment they recognized its shape, their power faltered. They had walked into the very symbol that undid their dominion ages ago, the place where their darkness was unmasked, the place where their claim was shattered. They hissed in terror, for they had thought the cross was a story, a relic, a myth, bound to parchment and preachers. Yet here it was alive, burning through the map of your very mind. It is written that Yeshua bore the weight of all chains and crushed the head of the serpent upon that cross. And now, the same authority they once mocked stood before them again. Not on a hill, not on wood, but on the living canvas of your spirit. They clawed at the light, hoping to snuff it out. Yet every strike only ignited brighter. Every attempt to twist the image only wove it tighter until the symbol burned across them like fire, branding their scales. The neural pathways lit up like constellations, mapping truth across every corner. They sought to claim the cross was not silent. It pulsed with life, each beat of your heart amplifying its power, each breath you took feeding its glow. The reptilians shrieked, but the sound collapsed against the brilliance of that shape. For there was no argument, no scheme, no deception that could stand against it. They had walked into the center of what they feared most, and though they tried to retreat, the pathways shifted behind them, closing off exits, weaving them deeper into the glow until the only thing left for them was to face the light that would not fade. The cross, etched in fire, that had claimed your mind long before they entered. The chamber shifted again, and what once felt like silence now began to hum a vibration so low it rattled the edges of their form. The reptilians searched for its source, but there was no instrument, no machine, no device. It came from within you, a frequency born not of wires or steel, but of breath and blood pulsing through every corner of your consciousness. It rose steady, unwavering, a sound that did not bend to their manipulation. They tried to twist it, as they had twisted countless others, inserting false tones, interference, static to break the rhythm, yet nothing they projected held against it. Every false sound was absorbed, swallowed into the current, until only the pure note remained. It was endless, without beginning or end, resonating through corridors. They could not map, stretching into dimensions they had never charted. The more they fought it, the more it pressed into them, carrying weight that pinned them down. The frequency was not noise, it was memory. It carried echoes of moments long past, victories carved into eternity. It spoke of design, of purpose, of alignment. Their schemes had thrived in chaos, but this resonance was order woven into sound, each pulse reminding them that they did not hold dominion here. They were intruders, and the frequency treated them as such. It turned their own vibrations against them, amplifying their deceit until it collapsed. They clawed at the air, seeking to tear open a gate to flee, but the sound bent every attempt, surrounding them with pressure that thickened like water. They swam through currents. They could not escape every second, dragging them deeper into resonance. Their scales vibrated, their thoughts fractured, until they could not distinguish themselves from the hum they had entered, thinking to control. But the longer they remained, the more the frequency consumed. You walked steady within it, the sound carrying you like a tide, unshaken by their struggle for the resonance recognized you. It bent for you, and you alone. It was the natural rhythm of your being, rising now because it had to. The reptilians had no shield against it, no armor strong enough to dull its weight. And though they fought with rage and cunning, the truth was clear. The frequency would not let them go. They drifted through the current of the frequency, only to find themselves drawn into another layer of your mind, a place where the lines between waking and sleeping blurred. Here, the air shimmered with visions, threads of light weaving images that flickered like living tapestries. The reptilians believed they could turn this place to their advantage, for dreams had always been their playground, the space where they planted fear illusions and commands. Yet the moment they tried to shape the dream, it resisted. A seal glowed in the distance, not carved in stone, nor drawn by hand, but suspended in the fabric of vision itself. It pulsed with authority. Every symbol woven into it, older than language, older than their dominion. The moment they approached, they felt its weight pressing against their form. Their claws dulled, their voices faltered. The seal marked the boundary of the dream, and unlike all others, they had invaded. This one was closed. They attempted to break it, hissing words of power, conjuring forms of terror, but the seal did not yield. Instead, it grew brighter, expanding outward until it covered the entire chamber of vision, its edges radiating with fire that burned yet did not consume. The reptilians recoiled, for the seal bore a mark. They recognized the same mark etched on the tomb that once held Yeshua, the same seal that no darkness could keep closed. And here it appeared again, woven into your dreamscape. The dream became a prison, not because it trapped you, but because it bound them. Every illusion they tried to summon collapsed the moment the seal pulsed. No nightmare could form. No distortion could take shape. Their power dissolved before it even reached your awareness, leaving them stranded in visions they could not control. Each attempt to bend reality only reinforced the seal, locking them tighter within. You did not wake, because there was no need to. Your spirit stood guard in stillness, the seal watching the invaders more than you ever could. They had thought the dream would be their escape, their place of dominion, but it became their cell, the walls invisible yet absolute. And though they raged against it, striking with fury, the seal did not break it, only grew stronger, as though it was waiting for the final moment to reveal what it truly guarded. Time shifted within the prison of the seal. The reptilians could no longer tell if they had lingered for seconds or centuries, for the dream moved without clocks bending hours into moments and moments into eternities. They had always thrived in the comfort of shadow, slipping between cracks unseen, feeding on what was hidden. Yet here, within your mind, there came a moment when the shadows themselves began to thin. The chamber dimmed at first, but not into darkness. Instead, the dimness cracked apart, light seeping in from places they could not close. The shadows they carried around them like cloaks began to tear threads, unraveling, as though something greater was pulling them loose. They tried to clutch them, tried to weave them tighter around their forms, but the fabric slipped through their claws, dissolving into dust before their eyes. What terrified them most was not the fading itself, but the realization that the shadows had never belonged to them. They had borrowed them, stolen fragments of fear, grief, despair, twisting them into garments to cover their emptiness. But now, each fragment was returning to its origin, every fear back to memory, every grief back to healing, every despair back to the silence that holds hope. The shadows they wore were reclaimed, leaving them bare. They shrieked and hissed, thrashing against the inevitable. Yet with each breath, their outlines grew thinner, scales becoming transparent voices, slipping into echoes until they were more suggestion than presence. The hour had come when shadow could no longer hide them. Your spirit had grown too luminous for disguise, too steadfast for illusion. They had gambled on your blindness, but your sight awakened, and in its glow their invisibility ended. Still, they lingered, flickering faintly, clinging to the corners, hoping for one last refuge. But the hour was not theirs. It was yours. The balance shifted against them as the light continued to spread, not harsh, not violent, but steady, peeling away everything false, exposing what had always been beneath the reptilians, were revealed not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as hollow fragments trapped in the web they themselves had chosen, and the light has not yet finished its unveiling, for there is one last truth it is waiting to show. The reptilians clawed at the fading remnants of shadow, desperate for any thread to hold, yet every attempt only dissolved faster. The labyrinth of your mind had led them here to the final chamber, a place they had never intended to enter, and yet could not avoid within this chamber. There was no mirror, no chain, no seal, only stillness, as if the air itself was waiting for something to be revealed. At the center rested a light, small, at first like an ember hidden beneath layers of silence. It pulsed gently, as though it had been breathing with you since the beginning. The reptilians circled it afraid, yet compelled they sensed it was the source of all that had undone them. The frequency, the psalm, the verse, the cross, all of it flowed from this single point. They reached to snuff it out, but their claws passed through, empty. Their voices faltered before sound could form. The light was not material, it was essence. The ember grew brighter, revealing itself as a key, not carved of metal nor shaped by hand, but living, luminous, a fragment of eternity that had chosen to rest within you. They recognized it then, though they tried not to admit it. It was the echo of the Word made flesh, the same presence that once walked among men, the same authority that had stripped them of dominion before. And now it lived inside you, hidden yet undeniable. They recoiled, for they understood at last they had not trapped you. They had been lured by what was always beyond their reach. They thought they had entered your mind, but they had entered the dwelling of something greater. Yeshua had once said, "The kingdom of God is within you." And in this moment, the truth of that verse rose like fire, the final key unlocking not their victory, but their downfall. The chamber shifted, the key pulsing with rhythm like a heartbeat, each glow expanding outward until the reptilians were forced to their knees. The prison was not built around them. They had walked into it willingly, deceived by their own hunger. And now the key revealed the last lock, not binding them within your mind, but binding them within themselves. And the glow continues to rise, pressing toward a revelation even they have never seen.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.